Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome back to our Nashville Predators Throwback 2000 franchise mode here in NHL 24. So in last episode, we made our first trade of the series, trading away Cliff Ronning to the St. Louis Blues. We brought in Ladislav Nagy and 2 second-round picks, which I think was a fantastic trade for the future of this team. And we continue to simulate a little bit more, but you can see we are now 27, 35, 3-2, so not doing too well. I believe, if I remember right, we are currently the 6th worst team in the entire league, so obviously we're kind of still looking to make some more moves to kind of make us even worse of a team in a sense. Like, if we go entire league-wise right now, you can currently see that we played 67 games and we're one of the worst teams. However, a lot of these other teams that are below us in the standings have played way less games, except for like the Washington Capitals. So there is a chance that some of these other teams like the Montreal Canadiens, the Chicago Blackhawks, the San Jose Sharks could all pass us in the standings, which means in a way we're technically like the 3rd worst team in the NHL, I'd say. So it'd be interesting to see if we end up finishing with a top 5 pick or not in this year's draft. Hopefully we end up tanking quite a bit more, because obviously we do not want to be a good team for the first few years of this year's probably, but eventually at some point we're going to obviously want to build up that core. So it's been a little bit of a weird start. I didn't expect us really even to get 27 wins this season. I kind of expected this team to do a lot bit worse, but it's been kind of a fun season so far because we've been getting some pretty good production from some guys like Rick Johnson, for example. Like, you can see he's got the 57 points. Yachmanev's been pretty good with 50 points. Shellberg has been simulating really well, which makes me think likely I am going to be probably flipping him away in this episode, because obviously him being 30 years old, this is probably almost like his peak performance. So I think he's going to be on the decline a little bit over the next few years. So likely he gets dealt this episode or in a future episode for sure. There's also the chance that we could deal away somebody like Rob Valachevic, who's kind of over-simulating in my opinion with the 19 goals and 33 points. He's also 30 years old, so maybe I decide to trade away Rob Valachevic, even though he doesn't really have that much value. Shellberg definitely has a bit more value to him. Also, Bill Holder, for example, 32 years of age, and he's got 32 points. I think he's definitely another one of those type of guys that we could look to flip away if we want to, just based on the age factor, so we could get ourselves a little bit younger. And yeah, that's pretty much, I think, the guys that I would be looking to flip away. There is a chance we could flip Mike Dunham if we really want to, just because Thomas Vokoun obviously could take over that starting role next season. However, I think I might just hold on to Dunham until at least the draft, and then we could kind of maybe make some additions via the draft instead, like trade him for, I don't know, a 2nd round pick or something like that, or for a future 2nd round pick, something like that, and that might help us out down the road. But definitely Vokoun is going to be the starter, I think, next season, and likely we'll probably end up running either Chris Mason as the backup goaltender next season, or we'll find ourselves a different goalie in free agency, because Chris Mason is kind of one of those goalies which I don't know if he's going to develop. I hope that he gets to at least like a 79 overall so he could be a good backup goalie, but right now his 75 overall at 23 with fringe starter potential isn't the best, but he has been simulating good in the AHL, so hopefully that means a little bit of growth for him coming this off season. But anyways, that's that. Let's get into your guys' comments now and see what you guys have to say about last episode, and then we will get into our first trade deadline, which should be exciting to see what type of trades the AI decides to make. So the first comment is from Saro Otaku, who says, I like the return on the Ronnie trade. Didn't expect you to get 2 second rounders in this deal. Side note, it's too bad Dale Hunter was out of the league by now, as it would have been funny to see the AI make a trade where him and Pierre Turgeon end up on the same team. And yeah, Dale Hunter retired at the end of 98-99, so he's just barely out of this franchise mode in a sense, because his last year of his career he was with, I guess it was the Colorado Avalanche, right? Because he had left Washington. So, but yeah, it would have been interesting to see him and Pierre Turgeon on the same team for sure, especially with that incident that happened back in, I think it was in 93 or 94. It was definitely when Hunter was with Washington still and Turgeon was with the Islanders. I think it was 93, but I'm not 100% sure on that. The next comment is from Flame Husky, who says, well, Nico Kapanen is an HPK stud, so maybe, because I was mentioning that, hey, maybe we could bring in Nico Kapanen, and I said that Husky would probably like that just based on the fact that he's Finnish. And I don't know if Nico Kapanen necessarily will be somebody we bring in, but definitely he is kind of an intriguing guy. I think he was on the block, right? Let me just double check on that front. I think he was. Yeah, there he is. 65 at 21 as a top 9 is really not that great. I should have maybe made him a little bit of a higher overall. He has not played a single game in the AHL this season, it seems like, so I guess they're just using him as a healthy scratch down there in the AHL, so that's not very smart of them, in my opinion. But yeah, he's a decent player. If we really wanted to bring him in, we could potentially, but I don't know exactly what we're going to be looking to get for the players that we could potentially be trading away in this episode. The next comment is from Michael Dose, who says, so glad they got rid of the OT losses in the standings nowadays, as it's too many numbers. And I totally agree, because when you have to say 27, 35, 3, and 2, it just seems so weird, because I'm not used to saying those 4 numbers. Instead, I'm used to obviously saying just the 3 numbers, but this one doesn't roll off the tongue as well, for sure. And the last and final 2 comments are from Dylan Burrows. The first one says, you should turn off the draft lottery since I don't think it was in effect yet. Or if you can't do that, just manually revert the changes. And there is no way to do that, unfortunately, in this game. In terms of reverting the changes, so you're basically saying, get, I guess, the first overall pick back to whoever was actually supposed to be the first overall pick. I don't think there's any way I could really do that as a GM in this without losing value and stuff like that, unfortunately. But if there was a way they had to turn off the draft lottery, that would be amazing. I probably should bring that up to EA at some point, because it would be a very nice thing, obviously, for franchise mode at this point in time, because obviously the draft lottery, I'm pretty sure it didn't exist till, I'd like to say, probably just after the lockout, right? It was probably 05, 06 when the lottery started coming into effect, or was it later than that even? I don't even know, to be honest. That's an interesting thing. Maybe I could look that up right now. When did the NHL draft lottery start? Oh, 1995 was actually first implemented. So actually we should be fine then. Yes, it says the NHL first implemented a draft lottery in 1995. Prior to that, the NHL draft order was strictly determined on the regular season standings. There have been plenty of changes since the original lottery, including the numbers of teams now that there is now 32 franchises. Huh, so I guess we're okay. We're okay. There has always been a draft lottery. I didn't realize that. Huh, okay. Well, the more you know. So we are fine with the draft lottery being a system. But obviously, if I was to do a franchise mode with my 92, 93 rosters, once that's finished, in a way, it would have been nice to have a feature where you could turn off the draft lottery, because obviously, back in those days, it didn't exist. And finally, Dylan says, also when it comes to trades, I think it's fair game if they send to you rather than you sending to them. Just my opinion. And I guess that makes some sense. If they offer me the trade, it makes sense. But if I'm offering them the trade, it doesn't make sense. But at the same time, I don't know if I really want to trade still for prospects and stuff like that and just build up our farm system super quickly, because I know that I could get probably like some good prospects for all these type of players, but I think I might end up just trading more for picks, just in a sense, because obviously it would be good for us to build up players via the draft, because I feel like the draft probably has better prospects than ones that are currently on certain teams and stuff like that. And I just don't really want to do the same approach that Tugi did when he'd used my rosters, where he brought in like Radim Verbata via trade and all those type of guys just to fill out the AHL and make it super stacked with a deep prospect pool. So I kind of want to take the more slow and steady approach. So I think trading for picks is something that I'll probably end up doing. So anyways, there's that. One thing before I get into this, though, I did want to take a look at how Cliff Ronning is doing in St. Louis at the moment, because oddly enough, I almost forgot. He actually was originally a St. Louis Blue, but before that was in his first 3 years of his career, and then he got dealt to the Vancouver Canucks, so he did return to where he started his career, which is kind of cool. And he's currently playing on the right side because they do have a lot of centers. He's playing on the top line with Turgeon and Dimitra, so that's a pretty filthy top line, I would say. A lot of passing, though. It's like, I don't know if they'd have good chemistry because they all have tape to tape, I just realized, so that's kind of weird. Okay, but let's take a look at how Cliff Ronning has been doing in St. Louis. He's up to 27 points in 36 games, but he is -8. Still having a pretty good time there for sure. He was actually doing better, though, with us, which is kind of weird. So, and he's rocking a number 8, which is also kind of weird. Yeah, that Blues team is very good. Definitely a team that could potentially win a Stanley Cup for sure. They have everything that they need pretty much, and they're offloading young guys too, so they're definitely trying to win as soon as possible, it seems like. Okay, so now that we have seen how Cliff Ronning is doing in St. Louis, I think we're ready to get to our first trade deadline. We're going to try and obviously make some trades with like Schellberg potentially involved, that type of thing. I don't know how much trades we're necessarily going to make in this episode, but I'm more interested in also what the AI is going to do in terms of trades, because I'm hoping that we could see some crazy trades that we're going to be like, what the hell? Why did this happen? Or if a player gets dealt to a team they actually played for, because that's always fun too. So our block, we're going to have Schellberg, Holder, Mike Dunham, I don't think is... Actually, he could stay on the block for now, but I don't think I'm going to deal him in this episode. Like I said, probably wait till the draft. I think that's probably a better outcome for him, just so we can keep him till the end of the season. In terms of other guys I want to put on the block, though, let me see. Let's see what we could do here. I think I might put Rob Valachevic just because he's been playing pretty decent this year. So we'll put him on there just to see if we get any offers. He does have one more year left on his contract as well. So he's not like a guy that I need to necessarily flip. As for other players I could flip, I don't think there's really any that I would look to flip. Barahowski might be okay to flip. He has 1 year left after the season. He has been pretty good, but I don't know if I would flip him yet. He is 29. I don't know if I see him in the future of this team, like, long term, because he is getting closer to retirement age in a sense. Everybody else on our team is pretty young, so... Technically, Greg Johnson's also pretty old, but I'm not going to deal him away. Like I said, I want to hold on to him until his retirement. I think I'm going to also throw Barahowski on the block just to see if we get any interesting offers for him. I don't know if I'm going to be flipping all these players away. I would probably deal away Shellberg for sure this year, though, and maybe Bill Holder. The other guys are all, like, optional. We could trade them away in the offseason instead. But Bill Holder probably should get dealt for sure because he's only got the 1 year left. Shellberg, on the other hand, has multiple years, so maybe we could wait till next year. But I would prefer to probably get rid of him while he's actually simulating well. And we'll keep the... Well, actually, we'll add thirds and fourths to the surplus of what we actually want. Because it would be interesting to see if we could get some good offers thrown at us. So I want to just see any type of offer for him. And we'll go to the trade finder as well just to see if we get any interesting offers first before we actually hop into the deadline for these guys. So I do want to kind of see what we could gauge from these teams. So obviously Shellberg's the highest trade value guy, him and Bill Holder. Actually, Bill Holder is a little bit better in terms of value. So it would be good to offload these two guys probably this episode. Barahowski does have good value too, though, which is interesting. So let's see. Bill Holder on an open block. What could he fetch us? A second, Hunter Kwiatkowski. Hunter in 2/3, 2 second-round picks. Ryan Miller, Alex Kolik, and Doug Janik. I'm not taking that deal, even though that kind of makes sense from Buffalo's perspective, I guess, right now, because they have, like, Hasek and whatnot. I still don't want to take Ryan Miller from them, especially for Bill Holder. It just doesn't make sense. The second rounder, Kalinin and Kolik. For Bada, Abisher, and Barry. We're getting some really good offers for Bill Holder, but a lot of them are ones that I feel like I'm cheating the system on, so I probably would prefer just to take the picks than rather trade for these prospects. 2 second rounders and Todd Fedoruk or Christian Berglund. Adam Mayer. That's interesting. I would probably lean towards the Boston one for 2 second round picks, but I'm not going to make any trades probably yet till we actually get into the deadline. I'm just curious on what we could potentially get. What else? For Shellberg, there's 21 offers. Hunter, third, and Kwiatkowski, so similar kind of results. 2 second round picks again. Miller, Peters, and Janik. Yeah, it's pretty much the exact same type of things. We could get Andreas Johansson, who actually played for the Nashville Predators not too long after this season. I got to take a look at how long after the season, because that would be interesting. Johansson is a lot younger, too, than Shellberg. That's a kind of a cool offer. I'm glad that Calgary is deciding that they don't want to hold on to Andreas Johansson. So Andreas Johansson, yeah, he didn't play in the NHL in 2001, or in 01-02 he played with the Rangers, but 02-03 and 03-04 he played with the Predators. So I actually might lean towards that trade just based on bringing in a guy that actually played there. Or there's Sergei Krivokrasov, who also did play for the Nashville Predators, and I believe that was the year before this. Let me take a look at that. That's interesting. The Flames are definitely giving us some things to think about. Yeah, he played for Nashville actually this season, Krivokrasov, but he was dealt at the deadline to Calgary, so basically we'd be getting him back, which is kind of hilarious to think about. But Krivokrasov was a decent Nashville player, had a 25-goal season 1 year, so that could be an interesting trade as well. I don't really need Darren Shannon or Daryl Shannon. That's Daryl Shannon, yeah, the defenseman, right? Darren is the former forward. Jeez, can't talk. A third in Nazarov. A second, Passmore in Bikanik, or I don't know how it's pronounced. For Bada, Abisher, Barry. 2 second rounders in Radovojevic. Second rounder, Erskine and Kapanen. So there's the Kapanen potential trade. Second rounder, Majewski and Butsayev. Huselius second and Ferentz. Second, Ferentz and Hagman. Second, Karkner and Stevenson. Corson a third and Stevenson. Don't need Shane Corson, especially considering he's like old at this point. Second rounder, Van Ryan and Berglund. Second, a third, and Fedoruk. A third, Jackman, and a third, and in a second, a third, and Ponikarovsky. I'm leaning towards one of those Calgary deals just based on the fact that both these guys played there. So Krivokrasov, technically, since he was dealt from Nashville to Calgary this season, I don't think it would kind of make it not as interesting. But Johansson, since he played for the Nashville Predators 2 years after this, or a couple years after this, I should say, I think I'm leaning towards this one for Kjellberg. I'm curious on how good Johansson's been playing. The good thing is Johansson can literally jump right into the spot where Kjellberg was. And I think he's actually a pending UFA, Andreas Johansson. He's been having actually a pretty damn good year too. 43 points in 63 games. And then Kjellberg's got the 49 points. So it's a little tiny bit of a downgrade, but not by much. Like overall wise, it's 3 downgrades in terms of overall rating. But in terms of production, it's not much. And then we also get a third and a fourth. That's interesting. The Flames are kind of a team that's 500 right now. They just want maybe more term because Kjellberg would be signed for next season. Meanwhile, Johansson, they might not be able to re-sign him. So I think I'm going to do this trade. Just because it's interesting to bring in a player that actually played for the Nashville Predators. So Patrick Kjellberg will be headed to the Calgary Flames for Andreas Johansson, a third and a fourth round pick. That's in next year's draft, which means that is in the 2001 draft. I don't know if those picks will actually mean anything to us. We might honestly flip them for future picks and stuff, but there is going to be our first trade of this episode and second trade of the series. So Andreas Johansson has joined the team. Yeah, okay, good. He's not in the AHL. That's good. Let's go to edit lines here, and we'll literally just put him in the same spot as where Kjellberg was. So Andreas Johansson, you're going to play on the top line. Actually, I could go with Yachmanov as the top line guy instead. I don't know exactly. We'll just probably keep it like that. Yeah, we'll probably keep it like that. So Johansson will play with Johnson and Walker. I am going to already try and give Andreas Johansson already an extension as well. Just because I think, obviously, since he's a pending UFA, I don't really want to lose him for nothing. I don't think I would. But I do want to already give him maybe an extension. If he wants an extension. Yeah, he does. 3 years at 2.65. We'll do that. Just since he was actually here till 0304, so it's a little bit longer than that, but still, I want to sign him. He's a younger guy too, so we get a little bit younger for a couple years, which is good. So anyways, let's head to the trade deadline itself, because obviously I want to see what the AI decides to do in terms of trades. Is there going to be anything that blows our socks completely off? As Johansson has accepted the extension, so that is awesome. Very excited to have him on board for another 3 seasons, and hopefully he does well with our team. So we're going to go in as a seller, and we're going to see what ends up happening at this first trade deadline. So the big names on the block: Glenn Murray, interesting, Andrew Castles, Gary Sutter, Roman Hamrlik, Mike Ricci, Brian Smolinski, Kevin Hatcher, Ulf Dahlin, German Titov, Alex Selivanov. Not the craziest of names on the block, but some of these guys definitely will be interesting to see where they go. Like Roman Hamrlik's technically a very interesting one because he's only 25. Like if I had trade value for Roman Hamrlik, maybe he'd be good for the future on the blue line, but at the same time he could be a free agent maybe by the time we're actually a competitive team. But let's go to find trade and see if we get any offers that we could get, maybe for like Bill Holder, because maybe we could flip Bill Holder still here. 2 second-round picks. It's changed a bit. Okay, so teams are offering us second-round picks only, it seems like right now. Who do I want to take the second-rounders from? I guess probably an Eastern team. You know, I'm going to send Bill Holder back to where he started his career as well. Actually, no, he started in Washington, didn't he? Or was it in Buffalo that he started? I got to double check on that. Don't want to be making these false stats up. He started in Washington, but still, he played in Buffalo for early stages of his career. So, yeah, we're going to trade Bill Holder back to Buffalo. That's going to be another trade for 2 second-round picks. Load up for these drafts coming up. And I don't think I'm going to make really probably any more trades, maybe. Unless there's anything interesting for one Drake Berehowski. Second and a third. I'd probably just rather hold on to Berehowski for that price point. So, there already has been a trade at the deadline. We'll look at them after the fact, not at the alerts on the bottom. Trying to think if I want to flip anybody else away on this team. Oh yeah, we were looking at maybe moving out Valachevic. Is there anything out there for Rob Valachevic? A 4th round pick, a 3rd round pick. At that point, I would probably just rather hold on to Valachevic. Probably, yeah. I'm not going to deal him, I don't think. Alright, I think that's all going to be it for trades. And I think Patrick Kjellberg literally just got dealt from Calgary already. They literally offered me that trade for Kjellberg, and they dealt him, I think, to Chicago. I think I just saw that on the bottom, like the tail end of it. Well, that's kind of weird. I don't even know if he got to play a single game with the Flames, but they decided just to trade him away again. Okay, yeah, I don't think I'm going to make any more trades. So let's see. I did just see something about Brian Campbell and Ryan Miller getting dealt, but I didn't see where. We're going to obviously find that out because we're going to exit this deadline. Okay, so Bill Holder was dealt, we know. Okay, here's a big blockbuster trade. Wow, okay, this is interesting. So the Los Angeles Kings have acquired 2 second-round picks in this year. Well, one in this year's draft, one in next year's draft. And Stefan Robida, so defensive prospect, for Brian Smolinski, Yaroslav Modry, a 4th-round pick, and Bob Corkum. So Montreal loading up, getting 2 useful centers, one a 4th-line kind of guy, and one of more of a top 6 center. And then Jaroslav Modry is kind of like a top 4 defenseman and a 4th-round pick. So that's kind of an interesting one. LA getting a good future defenseman in Robida. Hopefully he doesn't go on like LTIR for them or something like that. But that's an interesting trade nonetheless. The next one, Buffalo has acquired Roman Hamrlik and Alex Selivanov from the Oilers. And that was for Brian Campbell, Ryan Miller, and Jean-Luc Grandpierre. So Buffalo loading up for a potential playoff run. They bring in a legitimate top 4 defenseman. They bring in a top 6, top 9 forward kind of guy. And they give up their best prospects, basically, in Campbell and Miller, and also a top 6 defenseman in Jean-Luc Grandpierre. So that's a pretty interesting one. Edmonton could be found their future starting goaltender and a great top 4 defenseman. Meanwhile, Buffalo could be winning a Stanley Cup this season because of that addition of Roman Hamrlik. That's a huge addition to their blue line for sure. So that's a very interesting trade. And it'll be interesting to see how that pans out for both teams. So those are the only 2 blockbuster trades, but what other trades happened at the 2000 trade deadline? Let's see what we got here. So let me actually remove my face from this part just because that way, actually no, you guys can see all of it. Never mind. My face is in a good spot. That's good. Okay, never mind. So the first trade we could see here, Edmonton and Buffalo made also a different trade. They traded, Edmonton acquired a 3rd and a 4th and Jason Holland. And Buffalo got back a 3rd rounder in Jim Dowd. So Buffalo gets a 4th line center and a 3rd round pick basically. And Edmonton gets a depth defenseman and 2 picks as well. Alright. Atlanta has acquired a 2nd round pick and goaltender Johan Holmquist from the Rangers for a 3rd rounder, a 4th rounder, and David Harlock. So that's a depth defenseman with picks for a young goaltender who's probably not going to develop into much, and a 2nd round pick. Interesting. Chicago and Dallas. Chicago has acquired a 2nd rounder, a 7th rounder, and Rick Jackman from the Dallas Stars for a 3rd rounder, a 4th rounder, and also veteran forward Murray Craven. Okay. So Rick Jackman, though, what's interesting about him is he was a very high up pick. So in real life, he would have actually had more trade value probably at this point in time. But since in real life he didn't really pan out too much, he doesn't have that much value. The next trade, Anaheim has acquired a 3rd rounder, Barrett Jackman, and a 4th rounder from St. Louis. So Barrett Jackman will never get to play for the St. Louis Blues, apparently. For Trent Hunter and a 3rd round pick. So the Blues do get themselves a prospect for a prospect, and they get 1 less pick back in the trade. So that's kind of an interesting little flip-flop between those 2 teams. The San Jose Sharks acquire a 2nd, a 3rd, and Alexei Ponikarovsky from Toronto. So Ponikarovsky never going to get to play a game for the Leafs. But the Toronto Maple Leafs do acquire Gary Suter, so a good veteran top 4 defenseman. That's a pretty good addition for them in this day and age. And that could help them win a Stanley Cup too, potentially, if they're in the right spot. Vancouver and Anaheim. Vancouver's acquired a 2nd, a 4th, and Peter Tenkrat, so kind of a depth option. Anaheim acquires a 3rd rounder, a 4th rounder, and Greg Hogwood, a top 6 defenseman. All right. LA has acquired a 2nd round pick in Adam Mayer from Toronto for a 3rd rounder, a 4th rounder, and Dan Bylsma. I believe Adam Mayer played for the LA Kings around this point in time as well. I got to take a look at that just because it's kind of interesting looking back at this type of thing. So, Adam Mayer. We're looking for Mr. Mayer. Yes. The year after this, he was dealt from Toronto to LA. So, we had a pretty realistic result there. The interesting thing is, what was that trade? Or was it a waiver claim? No, it was a trade. He was traded by Toronto a year technically after this point. With a 2nd round pick, which became Mike Camilleri for Aki Berg. Damn, okay. That's a pretty bad trade when you think about Mike Camilleri's pick getting dealt. But Aki Berg was a top 6 defenseman at best, so that's interesting to note. Carolina's acquired Marcus Ragnarsson, a 4th and a 5th from San Jose for a 2nd rounder and Craig Adams. All right. Montreal acquires Matthias Nordstrom from LA from a 3rd and a 6th, so that's a pretty decent defensive option for the Montreal Canadiens. Montreal's definitely loading up a bit. Philadelphia acquires a 3rd, a 5th, and Nicholas Anderson from the Islanders for a 2nd rounder and Todd Fedoruk, so Todd Fedoruk on his way to the Islanders. The Ottawa Senators acquire Willie Mitchell and Mike Commodore, so Mike Commodore going to the Ottawa Senators quite a bit early because in real life it was in 2008-09, I'd like to say, or 2009-10 that him and Corey Stillman went to Ottawa. I remember that trade quite a bit. New Jersey acquires Magnus Arvidsson, so Arvidsson getting dealt a bit earlier than expected, so I guess Ottawa's not doing too well. But New Jersey gets a good top 6 forward for 2 prospects. Carolina's acquired a 3rd, Jamie Heward and Michael Pavanka from the Islanders for a 3rd rounder, a 5th rounder, and Yaroslav Svoboda. Okay, trade there. Washington gets a 2nd, a 3rd, and Ivan Majewski from Detroit for Steve Konowalchuk. So Majewski actually played for Washington, but what's interesting is I made him a free agent, I think, to start this franchise mode. So Detroit signed him and then dealt him to Washington, and then they get Steve Konowalchuk, who obviously was playing in Colorado a couple years after this because Washington, I think, dealt him away, if I remember right as well. Colorado has acquired Gary Galley and Kelly Buchberger from LA for Radim Verbata and Steve Moore. So the Steve Moore incident might never happen at this point, which is interesting. But Colorado getting another really good defenseman for their defensive core in a sense in Gary Galley. I mean, Gary Galley's kind of washed at this point, but he was actually decent. Kelly Buchberger, more of a physical presence, so that's kind of an interesting addition for the Avs. The Devils acquire Trent Klatt and Murray Barron from Vancouver for a 2nd rounder, and Mike Van Ryn. All right. Florida gets Daryl Shannon, Tommy Albeline, and Steve Dubinsky from Calgary for Christian Huselius and Brad Ferentz. So Calgary getting a Ferentz defenseman in this universe, which is interesting. It's not Andrew Ferentz. They're not related. But Christian Huselius goes into the Calgary Flames quite a bit early as well. Is kind of a cool one, so I like to see that. Boston gets Joe Murphy, Dmitry Mironov, and Ken Klee from Washington for a 2nd rounder, a 3rd rounder, and Bobby Allen. That seems like a lot for Boston to get for like barely anything. Damn. Props to the Boston GM for getting some good additions for a potential playoff run. We knew all about the Brian Campbell and Roman Hammerlick deal. Or is it the Ryan Miller deal? I guess it's more the Ryan Miller deal. But yeah, Calgary did decide to trade Patrick Schellberg after we dealt him there. They get back a 2nd and a 3rd. So basically they gave us a free player on top of that for a player that they decided to flip with a 5th and 6th round pick. So they got less value for Schellberg than we did, I think. Or maybe it's around similar value. Actually, maybe better value. Because the 2nd rounder is pretty high value in this type of franchise mode. The LA Kings acquire a 2nd rounder and a 2nd rounder Robida. We saw that. Nashville, obviously that's our trade. Anaheim acquires German Titov and Rem Murray from Edmonton for a 2nd, a 3rd, and Joel Kwiatkowski. I think I saw that one. And that was it. Because obviously the Rob Brown one we saw in the last episode. And we traded Patrick Schellberg as well. So there's that. I'm surprised that Patrick Schellberg got dealt right away again, because if Calgary offered me that trade, I don't know why they didn't decide just to hold on to Schellberg. Like, something must have flipped in between in this few days. I do want to see if Schellberg actually even got to play a single game with the Flames, though, because that's kind of an interesting one. Let's see. Did he play a single game with Calgary? No, he did not. I was kind of hoping he'd play one game with them, because it would look really weird on a stat card, but there is that. Anyways, we're finally done the trade deadline. Let's simulate the rest of the season and see how things shape up. and we'll also take a look at like award winners, see where we're drafting for next episode. So it's maybe still going to be a little bit of a longer episode, but I think a very fun episode just based on seeing those trades and that type of thing. But let's get the rest of the season done with and see how we finish off the year. Hopefully this team does not keep winning games, because I don't want to be somehow in the playoff mix. I want to kind of finish with a bottom 5 pick if possible. Marian Cesar has been injured. That's not great for the AHL team, which is in a playoff run right now. Cesar was leading them in points last time we saw, so hopefully he comes back soon. Kimmo Timonen has injured his hip. Well, that'll definitely help us in terms of making us a worse team. So there you go. And Cesar is back for the AHL, which is good. We'll put him back into the top line. He's up to a 76. He might actually be useful at the NHL level at some point, which is kind of nice. So there's that. Game against San Jose, another loss, and a loss to Chicago. Nice. Yeah, we're definitely not making the playoffs at this rate. Love to see it. Let's get these last 5 games done. Kimmo Timonen is back. We'll get him into the lineup, of course, though, because Timonen is also one of these guys that we definitely want to hold on to for a while. So there goes Kimmo. Let's continue to sim. Mike Watt has been now injured in the AHL. That's not great because it's another top AHL player. Montreal has fired their head coach. So after they made those trades that we saw at the deadline, they fired their head coach. So is Montreal not going to make the playoffs after all that? Now the question is, because I was looking in the last episode, is who is the current coach of these current teams at this point in time? I do want to see who Montreal's coach was in 2000. Because I don't think I could name off the top of my head. So I do want to take a look at who technically just got fired by the Montreal Canadiens in 2000. Alain Vigneault. Okay. Alain Vigneault. Former Vancouver head coach. That's interesting. Ville Peltonen has suffered an MCL sprain. Ouch. Yikes. Out till May 13th. Well, he's out for the rest of the season. Godspeed to Ville Peltonen. And we finished off our first season here in Nashville, 31-41, 7-3. And we finished second worst in our division, but we almost got passed by the Chicago Blackhawks. So that is kind of interesting. Is every team done their season now? Let me just double check on that. Yep, looks like it. Okay, perfect. That is good. So we'll take a look at our player stats now. We'll take a look at how good certain teams did as well. And we'll also see, obviously, who ends up winning the cup in year 1, that type of thing. But let's see what we got here. So entire league-wise, the best team in the entire NHL, the only team to hit 100 points, which is kind of surprising, was the Phoenix Coyotes. And it's probably just because of Khabibulin, because Khabibulin was actually really good at this point, but he wasn't in the NHL because he had a little bit of a contract dispute with the Coyotes, but it is what it is. Colorado was the second best. New Jersey up there as well. Boston, Dallas, St. Louis, Florida, and Philadelphia, your top 8. Okay. Where did we finish in terms of the entire league? We finished as the 5th worst team in the NHL. The draft lottery will be interesting to see if we stay at number 5 or if we drop off more. The Calgary Flames were literally the team that was above us, and they made that trade with Schellberg, and they gave us a 2nd and 3rd, was it? I can't even remember. And actually, it was later picks, and they just gave us Johansson. Yeah, it was later picks. In terms of goals for per game, let's take a look at who the best offensive teams are. The worst offensive team was the Montreal Canadiens. Yet they made some pretty interesting trades. So I don't know why they made the trades that they did, but they did. The best offensive team, though, was the Colorado Avalanche, followed by Philadelphia, Detroit. Kind of makes sense for this point in time. New Jersey being up there is kind of funny because they're more of a defensive team in real life at this point. But yeah, we were one of the worst offensive teams, which makes sense. Goals against per game wise, the worst defensive team is the Vancouver Canucks, who finished dead last, allowing 3.78 goals per game. We were not one of the worst defensive teams, though. Wow. Yeah, so our defense definitely helped us out a lot. We are actually a pretty good defensive team compared to a lot of other teams. I'm kind of surprised by that. We're just outside of the top 8. The best defensive team, the Coyotes. Second was New Jersey, so that makes realistic sense. So it's going to be probably between Brodeur and Khabibulin in terms of who wins the Vezina. Probably it's going to go to Khabibulin based on the wins and stuff like that. Let's see. Worst power play was the Montreal Canadiens. Best power play was the Colorado Avalanche. Kind of makes some sense there. The best penalty kill was the Boston Bruins. We actually had one of the best penalty kills in the league. That's pretty nice. 87%. So even though we were a bad team, we still had a good penalty kill and a good defensive effort. And the worst team on the penalty kill, the Washington Capitals. And somehow the Anaheim Ducks were the second worst, despite making the playoffs. Wow, okay. Most shorthanded goals for fun was the Dallas Stars with 12, and then we saw Chicago had no shorthanded goals this season. Worst home team, the Washington Capitals. Best home team, the St. Louis Blues. Best road team, the Coyotes. The worst was the Oilers, even though they made the playoffs. All right. Best last 10 games was the Dallas Stars, and we had the worst last 10 games. Okay. That's interesting. So there's that. Let's take a look at our player stats for year number 1 here. So starting off with our centers, Greg Johnson on 67 points. He was great, but a minus 15, obviously, because our team was bad defensively a bit in some stages. Tom Fitzgerald, 49 points, plus 3. Not too bad. Robitaille, 28 points. Bordeleau, 27. Leguan, 24 only in his rookie seasons. Not great, but obviously with the elevated ice time, he should be better at some point. Mark Mauer's on 20 points. All right. And 1 goal for Corey Millen in 7 games. Left wing wise, Yachmenov on 59 points. Andreas Johansson, who we brought in from the Calgary Flames, had 5 assists only in 15 games. So he definitely didn't really do too well with the addition to this team. But hey, we could change coaches and stuff in the offseason. But he's a really good fit for this top line. So we just need to find some people to play next to him that could shoot the puck a bit better maybe. Philly Peltonen on 25 points. Patrick Cote on 11 points in 58 games and 109 penalty minutes. How much fights? How much fights did he have? 14 fights. So he only had 3 more fights after last episode. Cote, 1 assist in 7 games. Right wing wise, Scott Walker on 54 points. Pretty good season for Scott Walker. Valchevik on 38 points and 20 goals. Definitely slowed down in the second half of the season, but still 20 goals from him is definitely better than expected. Defensively, Berehowski on 32 points in 82 games. Timonen on 29 points. Scratchins on 23. Miller on 15. Lintner on 13. And Vopot on 4 in 19. Alright. Goaltending-wise, Mike Dunham on a 907. Mike Dunham did very well. I think maybe our goaltending kind of carried our defensive play a bit. Because Mike Dunham started this season off on an 894. Wasn't an 897. An 894. After, like, I think the first episode that we did simulating-wise. So in the last 2 episodes, he's gone all the way up to a 907, which is crazy, and he had 5 shutouts. And Thomas Vokoun had not a great win-loss ratio, but a 904 is okay, and a 2.96. So there is our goalie stats. Let's take a look at stats around the league. I'm curious on who ended up having the most points and all of that, because this is always fun to look at as well. Joe Sakic, 108 points, the leading point guy. Peter Forsberg, number 2 with 100 points. Yeah, those guys are filthy. And then Paul Kariya with 98. Brendan Shanahan also has 98. Daniel Alfredson on 97. Yashin on 96. Bure on 93 points with 61 goals. Yager with 93 and 59 goals. And Steve Yzerman with 93 points and 38 goals. Okay. Let's take a look at the goal leader. It was, Bure. So Bure is going to run Richard this season. Makes a lot of sense. 61 goals. Yager was second with 59. Kariya with 58. Sakic with 58. And then a drastic drop-off to Keith Tkachuk, who had 47. Damn. So some pretty good goal scorers this season. Let's take a look at Selke candidates. Actually, I do want to take a look at some fun stats, too, like short-handed goals. Guy Carbonneau. That makes a lot of sense. Most power play goals for fun, too. Pavel Bure, not really a surprise on that front. Most game winners. Paul Kariya and Sergei Fedorov. Okay, makes some sense. Let's take a look at those Selke candidates. We'll also take a look at fight leaders for fun, too. Steve Ruchin might be up there for sure, because he had 10 more takeaways than Yzerman. I think he played way less games, too, because I think I saw that he was injured. He lost 2 games only. Okay. So Ruchin had more takeaways. Yzerman had a bit better face-off percentage. It's definitely, I think, between the 2 of those guys for the Selke this season. Pierre Turgeon also had a pretty good season, though, in terms of that. And Joe Sakic up there as well, but his face-off percentage is a bit less than some of the other guys, too, so, and takeaways. Most fights this season for a forward was Ian LePerriere with 31. Andrei Nazarov had 29, or Nazarov, I should say. Bob Probert only had 17. I'm kind of surprised that Bob Probert didn't fight as much of these guys, but is what it is. And of course, Ty Domi has to be right below Bob Probert. It's kind of crazy. Those guys had some spirited fights back in the day, way before I was alive. Best defenseman in terms of points this season, Ray Bourque with 73. Damn, the Avs are going to be insane. And then Phil Housley with 71. Brian Leetch with 65. And then Al McInnes hit 26 goals, and Brian Leetch had 24. All right, that's interesting. Let's take a look at the best goaltender in terms of wins. Nikolai Khabibulin with 36. Most shutouts, Damian Rhodes with 7. I still don't get why Damian Rhodes had 7 shutouts and how he finished 500 with that Atlanta Thrashers team in front of him. I won't question it, but it's really weird. Best save percentage by a starter, Dominik Hasek with a 920 through 65 games. You also have Brodeur with a 917 through 58 games, and Khabibulin with a 915 through 59. Maybe Hasek has a better chance to win the Vezina this year, but the goals against per game wise, Martin Brodeur had the lead with that. Then it was Khabibulin. And then you would probably look at somebody like Vernon and Hasek. So I feel like it's probably between Brodeur and Khabibulin because of the goals against. It's probably going to go to Brodeur, but he had way less wins, though, and less games than Hasek did. That's an interesting one to see who ends up winning the Vezina this season. Most goals by a goalie, nobody. And the most assists was Dominik Hasek with 4. And then obviously the rookie stuff is broken, so that's interesting. We'll find out the award winners shortly as well. Curious on who's going to win all those awards. And what is the playoff bracket going to look like for the 2000 season? Did our HL team make the playoffs? It looks like they did. Yep, they did. They are going to be taking on the Cleveland Lumberjacks. All right. Good on them. Good on them. But the playoff bracket, let's take a look at just the bracket here so you guys can see who's going up against who. The favorite apparently is the Coyotes at the moment, but in the Western Conference, you have Phoenix and LA. You have Colorado and Edmonton, St. Louis, Detroit. That should be a good one. Dallas and Anaheim. In the Eastern Conference, you got Ottawa and New Jersey. Interesting one there. Boston, Toronto, of course, because you have to have that matchup, it seems like. Florida and the Rangers, and Philadelphia and Buffalo. All right. And in the AHL playoffs, it's Michigan and Syracuse, Albany and Quebec, Chicago and Wilkes-Barre Scranton, Orlando and St. John, Louisville and Cincinnati, that being the Cyclones, I think. Yeah, it is the Cyclones for sure. Grand Rapids and the other Cincinnati team, that being the Mighty Ducks. And you have Philadelphia and Portland, Milwaukee and Cleveland. Okay. Let's simulate through this and see who ends up winning the Stanley Cup and Calder Cup in 1999-2000. Hopefully we get somewhat of a realistic result. We should put Mike Watt back in the lineup because obviously our AHL team is contending for a potential Calder Cup this season. So there you go. Mike Watt and Nagy probably will be in the lineup next season, which is pretty exciting. So who will win the Stanley Cup in 2000? As Arkhipov got injured in the AHL, that's not great for their Calder Cup run. And looks like they might have got eliminated because I have not got a notification that they're on to the next round, so that's not great, but it is what it is. We'll get Arkhipov back in anyways, just in case they are still playing. But who's going to win the Stanley Cup in 2000? Obviously, oh, they did get to the next round, never mind. But in real life, it was the New Jersey Devils beating the Dallas Stars, as Greg Klassen's been injured in the AHL now. Who is going to win the Stanley Cup? I feel like somehow the Coyotes are going to get it done again. Or get it done for the first time, I should say, just because of the fact that Khabibulin's in this. I should have probably made Khabibulin like a free agent or something like that, and same with Yashin in Ottawa, just based on the fact that they weren't even signing this season. Looks like our AHL team is going to the next round. I was just about to say got eliminated, but they're going to the next round, so shout out to them. Let's just go best lines in the NHL because we're not even playing. Nemesnikov has been injured in the AHL. Let's go replace player on that. Paul Healy was never injured. The AHL team's getting slapped with injuries too during this playoff run. And Nemesnikov is back, so we'll get him in. That being Evgeny's dad. Or Vladislav's dad. That's Evgeny Nemesnikov that we just put into the lineup. Yep. Oh, man. So there we go. Who is going to win the Stanley Cup? The New Jersey Devils. Let's go. Realistic results. When Tuki was playing this franchise mode, literally it was like 4 or 5 years straight where there was like an actual realistic Cup finals. So the New Jersey Devils win the Stanley Cup in the actual year they won the Stanley Cup. Philadelphia Phantoms win the Calder Cup in 2000. For those of you who were wondering who won the Calder Cup in 2000, it was the Hartford Wolfpack in real life. So I don't even think they made the playoffs in this, though, which is kind of interesting. But New Jersey winning the Stanley Cup the year they actually won it. The question is, who did they play? Because if they played Dallas or something like that, that would be amazing. But let's take a look at the New Jersey Devils team that won the Stanley Cup, because that should be interesting. Oh, it looks like they played Anaheim in the Cup Finals, because yep, it looks like it was Anaheim, so 3 years early. It's not too bad. But let's take a look at these Devils that won the Stanley Cup. So, Jason Arnott, of course, he had one game-winning goal. Was it the one that won the Stanley Cup? We'll never know. Scott Gomez, Bobby Holik, Sergei Nemchinov, and John Madden. Patrick Elias, Sergei Brilliant, and obviously Magnus Arvidsson, who we just saw they brought in from Ottawa. Right wing wise, Claude Lemieux, Peter Sikora, Alex McGinley, Trent Klatt, who they brought in, and Randy McKay. Defensively, Scott Niedermayer, Scott Stevens, Brian Rafalski, Vladimir Malikov, and Brad Bombardier. Looks like somebody got sent to the minors or some shit. And goalie wise, Martin Brodeur was a very good playoff goalie with a .928, and Chris Terreri was solid behind him. So shout out to the Devils, the Stanley Cup winners, and it looks like they beat the Anaheim Ducks, which is pretty amazing considering, like I said, this is 3 years earlier than obviously that actual Cup Finals. So New Jersey, the Stanley Cup champions. Phoenix won the President's Trophy, and yeah, it was, we can't tell on here, but it was definitely New Jersey and Anaheim, I believe. Let me actually take a look at the bracket first, because this will be interesting. Yeah, New Jersey won in 6 games over the Anaheim Ducks. And New Jersey was technically the first seed in the Eastern Conference as well, so that's pretty impressive. So basically the conference finals was New Jersey and Philadelphia in this, which in real life I believe that was the actual conference finals as well. So that's kind of cool. Dallas didn't get out of the first round. They lost to Anaheim. So if Dallas would have beat Anaheim, maybe we could have had an actual Cup Finals like we actually did in real life. Colorado got to the conference finals as well. Makes some sense. All right. That's interesting. How about the AHL? Curious on that. So our team got all the way to the conference finals and ended up losing to the eventual Calder Cup champions in 7 games in that conference finals. Interesting. So Philadelphia played the Quebec Citadels in the finals. All right. Did Hartford make the playoffs though? I don't think I said them, right? Nope, they did not make the playoffs. So unfortunately, a little bit unrealistic with that, but that doesn't matter too much to me. Let's take a look at individual awards for the season. So Joe Sakic, the Art Ross Trophy winner. Brendan Shanahan won the Hart. That's kind of weird. Ray Bourque, the James Norris. Joe Sakic, the Lady Byng. Paul Kariya, the Calder, because it's broken. Obviously, he wasn't a rookie this season. Claude Lemieux, the Conn Smythe. That's an interesting one. I probably would have given that to Brodeur, but Claude Lemieux, your Conn Smythe winner. Not what I had in my mind. Martin Brodeur did end up winning the Vezina in year 1, so some realistic results there. Hebby Bullen won the Jennings, though, him and Sean Burke. Dmitry Mironov, I almost said Danil Mironov or something like that, because I was thinking of Miro Manov, was it? Yeah, I think there's a guy in real life right now that's playing named Miro Manov. Danil Miro Manov? Yeah, I think so. But anyways, Dmitry Mironov winning the Bill Masterton for Boston. Arizona's coach winning the Jack Adams, which at this point in time, who was the head coach of the Phoenix Coyotes? Let's see if I can find this out here quickly. I know I'm adding a lot of random shit to this episode or whatever, but you guys are going to get some education and who was coaches and all that. So it was Bobby Francis, which I honestly don't really know too much about this guy. He only coached the Coyotes from 99-2000 to 2003-04. And he did actually win the Jack Adams in 2002. That's actually kind of interesting. I didn't realize he won a Jack Adams. But shout out to Bobby Francis. So there's that. Oh man, did I accidentally change screens? Oops. Didn't mean to do that. Let me get rid of this. Boom. How long was I on that screen for, actually? Goddamn. I hope I didn't screw up anything in terms of the rest of this episode. I hope I was not on that screen for a long time, because I didn't even touch my Stream Deck in terms of changing it over to my desktop. Oops. That's not great. Anyways, Steve Ruchin, the Selke. Brendan Shanahan, the Lindsay. Pavel Bure, the Maurice Richard. Alright. Not too bad on these awards. AHL-wise, Esa Tikkanen was the best player down there. I just want to take a look at this briefly. Esa Tikkanen again. Peter Tenkarat, Aaron Gavey, Lubomir Visnovsky, the best defenseman down there. Marty Turco, the best AHL goalie. Nicholas Anderson and Jack A. Butterfield, so he was the best player in the Calder Cup playoffs. Tommy Kallio, the best dedication to hockey or whatever. Rory Fitzpatrick, for us, won an award in his involvement in the community, so shout out to Rory Fitzpatrick. Marty Turco, another award. And Esa Tikkanen, obviously, we saw about. All right. Final few things to do to end off this season. Obviously, we got to find out where we're drafting, what the draft class is looking like, progress reports, contract situation, and then I'll be it for this episode. This episode's literally going to be close to an hour long. And we're staying at number 5, which means I think we're in the exact spot we could get Scott Hartnell potentially in, which is kind of funny. Vancouver will get the first overall pick, which means Marian Gaborik is likely on his way to the Vancouver Canucks. Then the generated guys off to Washington and Montreal, which means Chicago might be getting Danny Heatley. So, Hockey Guy 88 is going to like that a lot. Danny Heatley being on the Blackhawks, I think. But it looks like we are going to probably get Scott Hartnell unless we want to try and move up. But that's interesting. Retired players for year number 1. Nobody. These are just actual players. So nobody retired in year 1, which is good. Coach retirement-wise, did we lose anybody on our team? We did lose Isaiah Cracknell in our AHL team with Milwaukee, so I don't know who that is, but obviously we can make those adjustments this offseason. We aren't going to go to the draft interviews because I'm not doing draft interviews. But let's take a look at some stuff. So starting off with the contract situation for this offseason, who is the big pending free agents? Nobody really. We technically could just let go of all these guys if we want to, unless we want to bring back Cote for the grit purposes. But Cote's still a pending UFA. Fopot's a pending UFA. Millen obviously is a pending UFA. Same with Phil Crow. AHL-wise, Bertrand, Healy, and Sikora are all RFAs. Might bring them all back just to help out with the AHL team again. And that's it. So we don't really have much guys that we will potentially lose next episode. But we also got to make some decisions on if we want to start signing some of our younger prospects like Erat. Erat's not AHL eligible. Adam Hall isn't either, I think. Yeah, he's not either. He technically would be, but obviously he's not playing in the United States in this. Same with Andrew Hutchinson. Helbling is AHL eligible, but I don't think he's worth signing for the AHL yet. And then Brian Finley is not AHL eligible either just yet. So there's that. Let's take a look at the progress reports. Any growth from any guys on our team? Probably some statistical stuff. Ladislav Nagy obviously getting some natural growth is good. A lot of statistical on other guys like Scott Walker, who's jumped up to high top 6 potential, which is something I didn't give him for sure. So that's interesting. What about goalie-wise? Nothing really there. A little bit from Dunham. In the AHL, Mason's up to a 76. He's definitely getting close to being a backup. Defensively, a little bit of growth from Timo Helbling and from Andrew Hutchinson. Love to see it. Right wing-wise, Darren Hadar got some growth. Adam Hall got some growth as well. Paul Healy a little bit too. Ryan Tobler got some growth even though he has no potential. Patrick Fisher got some growth. Alright. Greg Klassen got some growth. And Denis Arkhipov a little bit of growth, but he's not NHL ready yet. He might be soon though. So there is that. Let's take a look at this draft class. Actually, let me take a look at the draft board first. How much picks do we have for this year's draft? Because I think we have a lot of second rounders now, right? We have a first, obviously. We have 3 second round picks, and we have our normal picks. So the question is, do we hold on to these second rounders for this year's draft? Because we know it's a little bit of a weaker one. But obviously, we could draft some real players that I made in this draft with those picks. Or we could trade them for future years. We could use them still, though, too. And at 5th overall, it'll be interesting to see what we end up grabbing. Let's take a look at this draft class anyways, a little bit more in depth. So, yeah, we are likely either going to be having to take either Scott Hartnell, who obviously was drafted by the Predators in real life. He is NHL ready. Doesn't have the highest potential in the world, but it's the same as like Justin Williams, who our scouts didn't even scout at all, but we know he's the top 6 forward. We have also Alex Frolov we could potentially go for. Defense leaders like Paul Martin, Ron Hainsey, John Michael Lyles. And then it drops off maybe a bit with like Vermette, Kronwall, Boys, Kunitz. I think I'd probably be leaning towards Hartnell just based on the realistic factor. But it's up to you guys on that front. Because I don't think Heatley's going to fall to us at 5. I think he's just going to go off the board before us to Chicago. But we could try and trade up one spot, but is it worth it? I don't know. Let me take a look at potential players here. So obviously we know Henrik Lundqvist is a high elite goalie, but I'm not going to draft him in this year's, I don't think, just because we already got our goaltender. There's Marcel Hossa, which obviously is not medium elite. He's not like his brother. There's some generated guys too. Is there any generated low elites? Probably not, right? Yeah, this draft class is probably not going to be super good at first. Like, there's going to be all the guys I made, and then there's just going to be a bunch of trash. And there's only the one gem, and that's Danny Lee. So, honestly, don't really know what we're going to draft here in this next episode. I'd say probably, obviously, getting Hartnell in the first round, but after that, who are we going to draft in, like, the second round? Because we have 3 second-round picks. Is there anybody actually interesting in the second round? There's Sean Avery. There's Vernon Fiddler, who's going to go early second round. It would be interesting to bring in Vernon Fiddler, but he was undrafted in real life and just signed as a free agent. There's like Pavel Vorobia, Vandermeer, Brooks Orpik's okay. Paul Gostad obviously played for the Preds at one point. But I don't know if some of these guys are worth it. There's also older guys like Pascal Dupuis, who's 20. Honestly, we might look to trade some of our second rounders for future seconds. There's Rick DiPietro. That would be actually not a bad option. Find our future replacement for Thomas Vokoun at some point. The thing with DiPietro is I think I made him almost NHL ready, so I think he's going to be like a 78, 77 or something like that, medium starter. So he would be AHL eligible as well. So we could think about Rick DiPietro with one of our seconds. For sure. There's also other former Preds like Greg Zanin. And then there's also former HPK guys for Husky like Antti Miettinen. So we do have options in the other rounds, but I don't know if they're necessarily the best options. Like, who wants to draft David Kochi, to be honest? So there is that. And that's going to do it, guys, for this episode of our Nashville Predators Throwback 2000 franchise mode. So in next episode, we will take it to our first draft and re-sign stages. We'll look to bring in some players that maybe actually played for the Preds. We might make some also trades at the draft, depending if we want to get rid of Mike Dunham already. We could potentially do that, or we could hold on to him for one more season. But we have some interesting decisions ahead of us, and this series is definitely going to plan so far. I'm having a lot of fun with it. Very happy that New Jersey won in year number 1. Just for the realistic factor to it, and hopefully we get still some realistic results, and hopefully eventually we could turn this Nashville team in from Trashville basically to a Smashville-ish team. So let us know down below, and I'll see you guys next time.